Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Lord of the Rings podcast titled The
Lord
Lords of the Ring-Shaped Foods.
Rings of Power.
5 episodes in. So my name is Aaron, my friend here,
My name is Alex.
and we're excited to talk to you more about our passion, Lord of the Rings, and also eat some ring-shaped foods.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alex, tell our listeners what we've got in front of us today.
Well, today I just got back from the smithy after crafting some ring-shaped foods.
Uh-huh.
You may know of pineapples.
I'm familiar.
Very tasty.
Uh-huh.
They don't come in a ring shape normally,
Mm-mm.
but with special tools I used today, including cutting board and knife and shot glass, I was able to craft these rings of power. They're pineapple rings.
Yeah, there you go. Core removed from the center. Although I will commend your work, Alex, because this isn't something easy to do. You had to start by removing the skin,
Yeah.
and then you had to, you chopped it up like into horizontal strips.
Like coins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after that point, every single one you cut the center out of.
It was a labor of love.
Yeah.
It was for the protection and proliferation of the elves.
As Alex mentioned earlier, he said, I feel like Celebrimbor crafting the rings right now. And I said, sound off in the comments if you think this is a good idea. I said that we should open up a Lord of the Rings shaped fondue restaurant called the Smelting Pot.
I love that idea. I think we would run into so many issues.
Yeah. We may be in legal jeopardy, but I think it's worth it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Just for dominance over ring-shaped foods alone.
And that's what rings are all about.
Dominion,
isn't it?
right?
Exactly.
And power over the flesh. So I'm going to...
Which we'll have over these pineapples in just a
Exactly.
moment. Power over the flesh.
Exactly. I'm going to eat one.
Yeah, me too.
Let's.
Cheers. The most mellow clink.
Well, lucky for us, these pineapples are not made of metal, so they don't clink.
Wow.
These are really good.
I haven't had a pineapple in a long time. I think I discovered in college that pineapple is one of my favorite fruits. And my mouth pays the price every time, but it's worth it. Just like the legal jeopardy.
They don't want to be eaten, folks. They have an enzyme that eats you while you eat it.
It's kind of a beautiful thing. Mutuality of nature.
Beautiful. I'm going to get through this one whole pineapple ring.
Yeah, same here. We might have to cut into the future a bit.
Yeah.
See you in a moment.
Those pineapples were delicious.
Delectable.
Tasty, tasty, sweet, 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 tingly.
Yeah. If you had to rate the experience from 1 to Milo when he sees Aaron Konzek come over, how excited were you to eat those?
I mean, most of the way to Milo, I think.
Yeah. It's
And-
hard to ever truly achieve all the way to Milo.
That's so true. He's such a good boy, is the thing.
Yeah.
And he is so pure of heart.
That's what I was going to say.
He is honest with his feelings. He's so excited for you to be home, especially if your name is Aaron Konzek.
We should say that Milo is a golden retriever dog. Although he
Context,
doesn't have
please.
to be.
He could be just a precocious boy.
Yeah.
He is a precocious boy.
But just for your reference, listeners, he's so cute. And I'm sure we'll throw up some pictures on the screen for you to revel in.
He's here with us right now.
Yeah.
Aaron Burgett. We have... I'm going to move back into the show. We have completed a series produced by Amazon Prime called Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. We finished it recently, and wow, what a journey week by week. What a saga. We committed every Thursday, after rehearsals, after work. We would get home tired, but we would get that second wind.
Grab a little snack.
Yes.
Maybe change into some comfy clothes.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I said maybe. Definitely change into some comfy
every
clothes.
single time got into comfies.
10:30 rolls around. Start up the episode.
Yep.
And
it was wonderful.
Just enjoy it.
I so enjoyed my experience of watching The Rings of Power. I think I want to start there because something that I've seen online is I think a lot of people who are like meh about the series. And I don't know, it does make me a little sad to see all of those like 6 out of 10 ratings. Just because I think that, I don't know, I really enjoyed what they put together, what the showrunners put together.
Yeah. Personally, I don't have an issue with like if someone gives it a 6 out of 10 rating. Like if you don't like it, sure, you don't like it. But I think something that is annoying to me is when I see like comments, for example, that just say this show is bad, but like won't actually give like a nuanced opinion about why.
Yeah.
And yeah, so same for me. Like I really enjoyed it. And I think, to be honest, like I would probably enjoy it even if I thought it was bad. Like, for example, we've talked about this before, the Hobbit movies. I thought those were bad movies.
Yeah.
But I was more appreciative to have them and watch them than for them never to exist.
Yeah.
And so in the case of this show, even if it was bad, I would say, yeah, it's bad, but I enjoy having like Tolkien material to watch.
I agree with that for sure. Yeah.
But I also thought it was on the good side of things. I will also say it's interesting because throughout this first season, like when people would ask me about it, when all my Adorian fans would come up and say, Aaron, we need to know your opinion on
They would
Rings
stop
of Power.
you in the street.
Yeah. I would say, people, listen, please. My response would be, I'm really enjoying it, but to be honest, like it's difficult to judge critically at this point because I'm not too sure where they're going with the series. So I can't really speak to how well some of these things are going to come across because I don't know if they're going to nail the delivery when it arrives.
Totally.
And so to a certain extent, getting to the end of season 1 is helpful to touch on some of those things. But then on the other hand, I kind of feel in the same spot. Like there's so many things set up by season 1 that I don't know how they're going to treat in future seasons. And so it's still hard to assess.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, with that in mind, Alex, what were some of the things that you enjoyed about the series?
Some of the things that I enjoyed in this series. First of all, many things. I thought the cinematography, the landscapes, the presentation of fight scenes, and there were some interesting like slow motion moments that I was like, what is this? Because I like it. I loved the costuming. I loved their attention to detail with the color palettes. I didn't find it cheesy. I really appreciated the moments that seemed like winks and nods to the people who are familiar with the lore, with the Silmarillion. I'm going to give a spoiler alert right now. If you haven't watched the show,
yeah, this will be riddled with spoilers.
It's about to happen in T-5 seconds. So click away. There is a moment when it is like made blatantly obvious that Halbrand, whoa, Halbrand is Sauron because he says, "Consider it a gift" to Celebrimbor, which is like a full, nod to the character Anatar, the Lord of Gifts.
Yeah. So for anyone who has read the Silmarillion, they would know in that moment, hi, Sauron.
Hello. Which, that was something that I that I loved. That there were those moments of like, oh, I know what they're talking about. You know, some of those proper nouns and, you know, all that sort of thing. That really worked for me.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot.
And those are the kind of things, like even in the original trilogy of movies, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King.
Yep.
Like overall, the story was really accessible to anyone who wanted to watch it, but there were also those Easter eggs and references that most people would be like, I didn't even understand if they were saying a real word. But to people who had read the books or read Silmarillion, they're like, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
That's a fun moment.
Yeah. I think that really worked for me a lot. And I think especially that part too. So specifically the part about Halbrand, the reveal in the last episode. Apparently there were lots and lots of people who had like guessed that Halbrand was Sauron before the last episode. And I think you had shared with me the episode before the last that like, did you know that some people are thinking that Halbrand might be Sauron?
Yeah.
And it totally caught me off guard, which flashback to a previous podcast episode. I remember saying, I want to be surprised when Sauron is revealed, because once you know, like the cat's out of the bag. And I will say, I was truly surprised. I was surprised in the moment that it was revealed. I was like, oh my gosh, here it is. It's happening. And that was a really special moment for me because I wanted to be duped.
Yeah.
And I
was.
was.
Totally. You mentioned that specifically in the podcast. So well done. Yeah. So I had read that theory online somewhere and didn't really put much stock into it because I was like, I don't really see what you have to base that on. It seems like just trying to guess that every person's Sauron.
Right.
Might it fit?
Is it Elrond?
Yeah.
Is it Gil-galad?
Right. So yeah, like I said, I didn't put much stock into it. But then for me, the first time I did actually consider it was, like you said, the episode. Actually, it was the episode before Numenor sailed to Middle-earth. So maybe that was the second to last episode. Anyway, because in that moment, what made me question it was when Halbrand, at the end of the episode, decided, like, yes, I'll serve as this king of the people like you want me to, and I'll sail to Middle-earth, and I'll bring them myself as their glorious ruler to come save them.
Also, everybody was so chill in the Southlands. They were like, oh, a king? Cool. we love to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they'd been itching for it for hundreds of years.
Maybe they were itching for other reasons too. They seemed like they didn't have great hygiene.
Yeah.
They were unwashed. They seemed a little dirty.
Yeah. Yeah, especially the ones that went to the dark side.
I don't know if they made it. But Halbrand. So in that moment where he was like, had a sort of a heel turn, that was the moment for you. There were other moments too, like reflecting, that it was like, oh, yeah. Like when Halbrand gets into a fight with those 4 other people in Numenor and just like, I don't know, goes berserk. That was kind of a weird moment that stuck out to me. And I'm like, no, something's weird about this. And I think at that moment I thought, oh, this is connected to that sword. Like maybe he was one of those people who used that weird like Morgul blade or whatever it was. And then he's like has some residual like evil in him or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, when that happened, it kind of made me think, even though I had seen the theory already at that point, it kind of made me think, no, this is not Sauron, because before he went berserk, he kind of said something like, please don't do this to the guys who were attacking him. And so it seemed to me like if they were to keep hurting him, then he would lose control and obliterate them.
Yeah.
Like he did.
He did.
But now reflecting, I don't know if he actually like lost control of himself or was just trying to give them fair warning in that instance, or what that was, that plea before going crazy.
I think that I'm gonna just hazard a guess here. This is maybe a little bit of a speculation into their intentions for the character of Sauron. In the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, you don't really get to understand the attitude or character of Sauron. Sauron is just kind of like an evil presence, an eye in the distance, like a raspy voice. Perhaps because this is a second age Sauron with more abilities, like the shape-shifting, the illusions, the battles of will, that they are more easily able to explore him as a person, as a character. And he is different from Melkor. He is different from Morgoth. His main tactic is not immediately to enact war. His first tactic is to trick people. And I think I got some of that in the way that Halbrand, tried to solve his problems, was to get other people to do things for him.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, he was good at that. And like you said, I think they set up the surprise well in that even when he was doing that, it didn't seem like he was being overtly manipulative. It just seemed like he was good at making things work out his way, which is also, same thing for Elrond, same thing for Gandalf. They're good at making things work out the way that they think they should.
Yeah.
So you don't assume that it's evil.
I did get an evil vibe from Elrond.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
In this series, but we'll put a pin in that. Yeah. So that was, I don't know, getting back to the thing of like, you asked me what I really liked about the series. That was something that really stood out at the end, is seems to be this thread of Sauron's influence.
Yeah.
That even from the very first episode of this series, we are seeing the shadows or the footprints of Sauron. And I liked that. I liked that you can kind of follow through each episode and be like, what are the plans that Sauron has already put in place that are unfolding behind the scenes? And it didn't feel so explicit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it did. Like Mountain Doom felt very explicit.
Right, totally. But there's also like this big question mark of what's the connection between the character of Sauron and the character Adar, who's like this corrupted elf lord who rules over like hundreds of orcs. He's basically like the orc father. And are they working together? Is Adar with Sauron, or are they like competing forces, or is it similar to Sauron's relationship with Saruman, where they're both just trying to use each other? Because it seemed like a lot of the influence, the shadow that was present in the Southland, it seemed like they were expressing it as from Sauron. But then by the time we get to the end and understand a little bit more about the character of Adar, you don't really know who is contributing most to this shadow.
Yeah. Those are very good points. As you were saying, like, does the character Adar and the character Sauron work together? I was shaking my head no. And I think the reason I think that is, one, Adar says in the show, like, I killed Sauron. And I was like, probably not. But when the two of them do meet in the episode where Numenor comes and rescues the Southlands, Galadriel and Halbrand work together to chase Adar, like through the forest, woods, like on horseback.
Yeah.
And there's a moment when Galadriel stops Halbrand from killing Adar. We need him alive, sort of thing. And Halbrand says, do you remember my face? So I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
I don't think they were together. And if I can hazard a guess, I think that in the Third Age, we absolutely know that Sauron is like the most influential and prominent of Melkor's lieutenants. But in the First Age, it's not so obvious, like that Sauron is like gonna be that. Like maybe there are others that have more influence in the First Age. He's kind of more behind the scenes, and perhaps that's like kind of a holdover into the Second Age too, where he's like mostly in the background for a while.
Yeah. Well, in the First Age, Sauron was considered like Morgoth's chief lieutenant. And so I think he did have that kind of preeminent place as, I don't know, next in line, I guess. But I do love that idea of like the competing bads that are left over in the world, because there isn't, like, at the same time, even though he was the chief lieutenant, that doesn't mean that in terms of the flow chart,
the power vacuum.
Exactly, within the organization of the corporation. Like, he wasn't necessarily the direct supervisor of the Balrogs.
No.
And so that, I love the idea of exploring these different dark powers and who's going to emerge as the one to really be the dominant dark will in the world.
And so, that's my impression with Adar, is that Adar has a very different idea of filling the role of evil in the world, where I don't even think Adar considers himself evil. Like, when he is talking with Galadriel, he's like, the orcs are my children, and we have just as much a right to be here. We have the same breath that the One put in you as is in us. And so my impression with him is like, he will do anything to give a home to his people, even if that means murdering and, raiding and getting the people out of the Southlands, which is a different idea than what Sauron has for Middle-earth.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of that Adar plot point, in terms of him trying to establish a home for his people, when I first think about that, I really don't like it, because I think there's certainly a lot of room for complication of what's good and what's evil within the world. But I think it also is important to have these certain characters within the world that you do know are evil. And so I think in my head, when I think about elves being corrupted into orcs, I think about like this first generation of corrupted elves, which is who I see Adar as. And then I think about anyone who was like spawned from them as a new orc being. Those are the ones that I think of as completely irredeemable, and not like fallen from grace, but actually born of the evil of Melkor.
Yeah.
Just like the dragons, for example. I would think of those the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's ways that they can treat it well, but that certainly wasn't my favorite plot point.
You were not a fan of Adar and his machinations.
Really. No. I mean, his machinations, sure, like the way they were playing out, but I think the influence and the saying like, no, you should feel sorry for us orcs. We just don't have a place in the world. I wasn't into that.
Right.
Yeah.
You asked me the question, what were the things that you really liked about it? What were the things that worked for me? I would like to pose the same question to you.
Yeah. Well, just kind of piggybacking off of a couple of things that you said. First of all, you were talking about some of the like choreography and slow-mo motions that were included. We were watching Obi-Wan a few months ago, and there were moments in that where we were all kind of pointing out, oh, this is some bad fight choreography. Like Obi-Wan would be trapped. Someone would have like their arms wrapped around him, and then all of a sudden he would just be like, huh! And then slip out from them without actually doing anything that would have worked. I don't know, just weird things like that. And so I did really appreciate good choreography of fighting scenes in this series.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, thinking about like the slow-mo scene of Arondir catching the arrow and then putting it in his bow and turning it back around to fire at the orcs who are chasing him.
Yeah.
That kind of reminded me of Legolas in the Two Towers when he grabs the horse in slow-mo and flips up behind Gimli and rides on with it.
Galadriel did that a couple times.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. Let's see. Oh, I also enjoy, honestly, the treatment of violence and terror within this series because I think a lot of like the whole world of Middle Earth, there's some super, super dark stories that are told and terrible things that happen in the ways that like the orcs will treat elves and humans and other creatures. So I appreciated like how scary that all was and like how you as a watcher, when you were seeing those battle scenes, it wasn't something where like you could just count on seeing someone slashes a person in front of them and then they fall down, because that's not very scary and that doesn't really like connect you to how terrible war is. So I think actually having a little more graphic scenes in this series was appealing to me and kind of gave me that fear that I think was warranted.
Gosh. I just had a flashback to one of those scenes that was like almost a little bit too much. It was with Arondir and he's fighting like a really big orc.
Oh yeah.
And the orc like gets him up against this well and he like has some sort of like wooden stake or something that he's like trying to pierce into the eyeball of
after
Arondir.
He's pulled it out of his own eyeball.
I forgot. Oh yeah, and at the same time, like like black blood is gushing out of the eye socket.
Not dripping, gushing.
It is gushing, and it's like pouring onto the face of Arondir.
That was horrifying.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Also, yeah, similarly, like hard to watch, but also I think warranted and helpful in conveying the terror of the orcs is how they show like women going into battle and being killed as well. Like they wouldn't have spared women or children within these fights either. So yeah, I think that added to the fear and the terror that these evil creatures cause.
Yeah. I wanted to respond to something that you said that addresses and sort of like, you know, pushes in that direction too, is there's a moment when Galadriel is paired up with Theon. Is that his name?
Yep.
Theon? I think it's Theo.
Yeah.
The son.
Theon's the, what is it? Game of Thrones?
Oh, yeah. So Theo is the son of Bronwyn, and he's kind of like this maybe 13-year-old or something like that who like wants to be a man and, you know, like that sort of thing, but then kind of falls into like, I don't know, weirdness with, you know, using that sword and having that weird encounter with that dude who was like, have you heard of Sauron? Galadriel and Theo are together, and I forget exactly what he says to her, but it's basically along the lines of like, it's so good what we did. And her response to him was like, to call like dark choices or dark things good darkens your heart. And I feel like that was a big turning point for Galadriel in this series, that it was like the first time that we really see her being an advisor or a mentor to other people, as opposed to a militant follow what I say kind of person. Like it is still heed my words, but less of like do what I tell you to do and more of like you should be careful with treating these acts of violence as good things because that will corrupt you, as I have been corrupted in my chase for Sauron. And so I think that mirrors you know, what you're saying, like along with the action scenes, along with the violence.
Was that the same conversation where she said, you cannot quench your thirst by drinking ocean water?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
I really liked that.
like wanting to make things right by bringing more violence into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I did too. And that was something we had both been kind of itching for the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that you had kind of alluded to and that I really enjoyed was at the end of the season, I think in the last episode, when Galadriel realizes that Halbrand is Sauron,
Mm-hmm.
the two of them enter into this battle of wills.
Yes.
Because Sauron kind of enters her mind, I guess, and takes her to these different places to influence her and win her over to be on his team, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. And so they kind of like transport to these different locations that we had already seen Galadriel in. And yeah, it's basically just like their mind power and their willpower at odds with each other, both trying to reason against the other side and also just like trying to have their pure will beat out the other one.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool to see because I think that's something that is portrayed throughout the Silmarillion, but we don't necessarily, I mean, up to this point, I don't think we've really had much of a chance to see
No.
TV portrayals.
It's also very faithful to Tolkien's writing, I think, where I think the way that we see magic or superpowers portrayed in newer material, like more like now material, is like hard magic systems of like, oh, you know, like this is how magic works in this way, and like this person is better than this person because they know like the techniques better or something like that. But Tolkien's writing is way more loosey-goosey, and it has to do with maybe like hierarchies or like with this willpower thing. And I really appreciated that that was like observed in this show, that Sauron is this fallen angel, essentially, who is attempting to corrupt one of the original beings of the world. And Galadriel is one of the very few people in the whole lore that can contend with the will of Sauron. There are very few others that can even like put themselves in that place.
Yeah.
Like not even Gandalf puts himself in that place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of hierarchy among the characters of the world, like there definitely is that laid out between, for example, the Valar and the Maiar and the elves and the humans, and in terms of how much power you can generally assume that they have. But at the same time, like even though Sauron is a Maiar, which is generally assumed to be stronger than an elf, like if you have two boxers and one is objectively better than the other, they might beat the other person 8 out of 10 times, but that doesn't mean they're going to win every time. And so it's one of those moments where like there's hope of Galadriel winning out, even though she knows that ultimately she's of the weaker substance.
Yeah. I think there's something too to be said about her intention. Like it is sort of up to that point in the show where she has been portrayed as someone who is being driven forward out of vengeance. That her brother, Finrod, was murdered and marked by Sauron as maybe even like a taunt, that Sauron likes to see the corruption and can use the sort of like elements of emotions that come out of corruption to his advantage. Vengeance being one of those things. I think that this is the first point in the show for Galadriel where she realizes prominently, I have been used, or the way that I have been going about avenging my brother has not served me. And so she is presented with this opportunity to bring order to Middle-earth and to kind of like maybe even like I would use the word steward, like become a steward of Middle Earth, which is something that she eventually becomes in Lothlorien. Is she is a steward over that land. But I think that this is the point that they're trying to tell in the story where she makes that distinction, that Sauron doesn't know the difference between domination and stewardship, that those are kind of like synonymous for him. And Galadriel realizes that in this moment, that like she has been darkened up into this point where he is giving her an option to be a queen alongside him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's ultimately the reason that she continued to leave Valinor and come to Middle-earth, because she wanted to have a realm for her own and to kind of carve her own path and have her own power and region within the world. So that makes a lot of sense. I think one other thing that it kind of tears me about the series is my own opinions on, number one, really loving how in this whole world of lore, there's a certain question mark that lingers about how much of it is mythology. And for example, it is said that so-and-so occurred, versus how much of it is actually like historical to the world. You know, so like, for example, we were talking about the creation of the orcs. Like that's one of the things that even within the lore, it says it is believed that Melkor corrupted elves and turned them into the first orcs. But you don't really know if that is actually the way that they came about.
Yeah.
And so like on one hand, I love that, just that ambiguity and like just leaving that up to your own imagination to figure out how you're going to process that.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I also want to see everything portrayed.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about the First Age, there's so many cool events that would be awesome to see on screen. But you can't really have it both ways. Like you can't see all of it portrayed and still expect to have that ambiguity of not really knowing what could be concretely held onto versus what is a little more loosey-goosey and just kind of assumed within the world.
Yeah, you would have to have characters tell those stories.
Like, which they have some.
That's right.
Like there was that weird one about the tree and the elf and the Balrog.
That's a good point. I think it would have been nice to have sort of reaction cams on us when we were watching that part of the episode, because I think I was definitely making the face.
I had one eye a little squinted.
Yeah, where it's like, I don't remember this part. My sort of impression of what they were trying to say with that was there is like the power of the Silmarils was imbued into veins of ore in the mountain
to create Mithril.
Right.
Yeah.
Where there's like they took Mithril, which is associated with elves. No, dwarves?
Yeah.
Both?
Well, both.
Okay. But more is like, okay, it's light as a feather, it's strong, and it's like, no, but actually Mithril is also this like healing agent, that it like preserves the vitality, the power.
That's true. I guess that story was part of a kind of wider weirdness.
I think they were trying to take a lot of different ideas and like condense them into something that would work as a story, like a device, like a literary device.
Yeah, but also kind of just leave it weirdly too vague. Because it's just like, oh, the world is darkening, or like the elves' time is coming to an end somehow. And like I do like how they were clear that the elves themselves and their own vitality and lives are connected to the world itself.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just weird, like the corruption creeping into the leaves and just the presence of the Mithril itself would drive that darkness away. I mean, within the show, it kind of makes sense because they said it's imbued with the light of a Silmaril, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a pretty hard left turn.
I think we are venturing into the next section of this podcast episode, which is maybe the things that didn't work so well for us.
Right.
So would this be perhaps the first thing of yours that didn't work so good for you?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned the Adar thing. That was kind of weird to me. Also, he was really hard to understand.
He definitely had like peanut butter
Like,
on.
never again.
He was difficult to understand.
Yeah.
Subtitles are great.
Uh-huh. So that was one iffy thing for me. The other thing was, the trees are turning black.
It seemed like it was just that one tree.
Yeah, I guess. And it, like, we haven't seen if and whether it's connected to the shadow growing in the Southlands at all. But at this point, they seem like separate plot points.
I think it's separate. I think the tree is a metaphor for, like, the souls of the elves. Because didn't
an indicator?
Yeah, Gil-galad was like, it's not that we will die. It's that we will, like, wither or something like that. We will become shades or something like that. Maybe even something akin to those three witches. Like a sort of like half being, like, you know, like a wraith, half in the spirit world.
I don't remember that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that was the part where Elrond was telling Gil-galad, like, I can't break the oath that I made to my friend. And he was like, you don't get it. Like, we don't. Actually, it may have been when Celebrimbor was like, I need more time. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I just kind of remember that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. What were the things that you would have wished were different?
I think my biggest, like, oh man, about the series is pacing. That I think I want to use like a different example, like a different show, as an example of where I see this. I freaking loved Avatar: The Last Airbender. It was truly
tunnel.
Yeah, truly one of the best shows I've ever seen, and I've watched it like 4 or 5 times, like all the way through. Legend of Korra, the first season, is too fast. They try to, in my opinion, tried to do too much in too few episodes. And I think that part of the reason for that is because they weren't guaranteed another season after that, where I think it was only like 12 episodes, and they cover so much ground that there is not room for character development.
Yeah.
There is not room to sit in certain moments. There's not room for like mystery to build or tension to build. And I absolutely felt those same feelings with this series. For instance, there were moments when I would kind of have like a sigh, like a defeated, like, oh, dang. At certain plot points where it was like, oh, well, I guess that's it. We're just moving on.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that was so interesting, like a mystery, was this symbol, like Sauron's symbol. And then I think it's not even like it is in one episode that they figure it out.
Yeah.
Like when she arrives at Numenor and works with, like, goes on a ride with Elendil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they like go to this library and it's like, oh, well, here's the answer, I guess. And I didn't love that. I think that was something that detracted from the show, that they were like, we have no time for these mysteries.
It's a missed opportunity, because that's one of the huge advantages of having a show instead of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do have so much more time to leave tension and explore those things. And like you said, Avatar did such a good job of, in every single episode, what was it, 20, 25 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And they did 2 things. Number one, they had a self-contained episode where there is a story that is started and told and at least somewhat concluded by the end. But then also every single one of those episodes contributes to the larger plot point that's going throughout the entire series.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree. I think it wasn't handled as well in this one.
There were quite a
This
few
series.
moments like that where they had no time. It was as if the whips of their masters were at their backs. And I felt that they were rushing, and they had so many different characters, so many different, stories that they were telling all at once. And while sometimes that really worked, there were other moments where I was like, I think there was a whole episode where it was just about like Arondir, Bronwyn, Theo, kind of like surviving the orc attack, and then Numenor showing up. And it's like, well, that whole episode we didn't check in with the Harfoots.
Yeah.
We didn't really check in with, like that sort of thing. And I felt that where it's like, if you're going to have all of these different storylines going on, like that's fine. But I wish there were twice the amount of episodes, or maybe even 3 times the amount of episodes, so that we could have really dived into those moments.
Absolutely. Like I don't care so much about whether we see all of the plot points and all of the characters in every episode. Like that doesn't matter to me so much. But like you said, when I think about this compared to something like Game of Thrones that also has tons of characters and you don't see everyone in every episode, they took their time and like made long episodes, made long seasons, and explored things in all the depth that they deserved.
Oof. Somewhere where I really felt it, it was the last episode, and I know you felt it too, because I think we had like a short terse exchange. Was the part where Celebrimbor is like, we're going to create a circular object, maybe a crown or a circlet, and it's like, oh my god. Like they are just, I feel like I remember in the Silmarillion, and granted, they don't have rights to the Silmarillion, they have rights to the appendices. But in the Silmarillion, it felt like it was over the course of years and years and years that Annatar imparted this gift of ringcraft to the elves. And my guy is given this like ringcraft to Celebrimbor in like, what, 2 days? Like
I know.
an afternoon?
And they weirdly like acknowledged that outright when they were walking by Celebrimbor and Gil-galad, or Celebrimbor and Elrond. And he's saying like 3 weeks to complete something that could take 300 years. And yeah, it's such a shame.
Yep. And yeah, I think it is a product of needing to get through the amount that they wanted to get through.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was at the expense of building tension, where it was like, oh my gosh, in the same episode, we see, like, we understand this character, Halbrand, to be Sauron. And also in the same episode, Galadriel figures it out.
Yeah.
That was not great.
I know. Just from like her sitting in the background and hearing what Celebrimbor kind of parrots back from him. But you do bring up a really difficult restriction with which that they've had to work.
Yeah.
And that is not having the rights to the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, I don't think I even realized that till recently, reading more about it. And it makes so much sense the way that they are approaching each of these stories.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, like if I was making a series like this, I don't know where I would start if I was exploring the Second Age without being able to touch on Silmarillion material. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't think the case is that they're not allowed to use Silmarillion material, but I think the case is that they're only allowed to use what's in the appendices.
Yeah.
Or their own original ideas in addition to that.
A la Mithril Silmaril.
Exactly. So, yeah, I do understand now that makes it really difficult to be able to tell any of the stories that a lot of us who have been fans previously might expect from it. But yeah, all in all, like we've both said, we enjoyed it more than not. Yeah. I think one other thing that I hope for more of in future seasons is they did do a really, really good job with the visuals and like CGI and set design and all that. But I do hope for larger scale everything next season.
Say more.
I think particularly in the number of people involved in things, like Numenor, that's millions of people on the island.
You're right. When they were like, we're going to war, and they sent like 2 boats.
Yeah, they've got like the little town square gathering. Yeah, so like number of people, I guess also and how expansive the range is between the different realms and how wide and expansive the Southlands would be even. Like we just see these little villages, but we don't realize that there must have been hundreds and hundreds of those towns throughout the region.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And so I just hope to see more to really portray like, yeah, this is its own entire planet. Like it's not just one Australia-sized continent to hold the whole world.
That's true. And it's flat.
Is it at this point? No. Oh yeah, you're right. Wow. We're allowed to reveal what's to come, right?
Well, that I was actually, as you were talking, thinking about what to talk about next. And that is like, you were just saying like hopes for the future seasons. But I was actually going to take it one step farther and ask you for predictions about future seasons, because I got some predictions of my own.
Well, let me hear yours first.
Okay. So one of the predictions that I have for future seasons is... So it's going to be about Numenor. And we have already seen like glimpses of like the fall of Numenor, in Tarmiriel's visions. This is the Numenorian queen. She has been having these like recurring nightmares. Her dad was like, "There's only darkness for you if you go to Middle Earth." But it's like, with her storyline, she's kind of just enacting chronology. Like she's just there's no way to avoid the things that she is seeing in the future. That's very much the vibe I'm getting from her character. So she's like the tragic character, and I think that she is going to be the vessel through which we really feel the downfall of Numenor, where she is occupying the role of the faithful, of the Numenorians who stick to the ways of the elves, of the Eldar, and our Pharazôn, or rather just Pharazôn at this point, is going to be the character that portrays the fear of death, the desire to dominate, to become a colonial power over the sort of western coast of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
And so my prediction is like that for next season, seeing more about Numenor and this greater division between these who follow Pharazôn, and then overthrowing the regime of Miriel, and then he's gonna force her to marry him as like a sign that she's cool with it.
Yeah, I in my most recent reading of the Silmarillion, one thing that stuck out to me was thinking of Pharazôn and Miriel as kind of a reverse Adam and Eve. Whereas in the biblical story of Adam and Eve, you have Eve who is tempted by the serpent to reach out and take hold of this one thing that has been withheld by God, which is the fruit of the forbidden tree. And in the Silmarillion with Pharazôn and Miriel, you have Pharazôn, who's basically acting as the Eve character, who's being tempted by this serpent who is Sauron
Yeah.
when he ends up in Numenor and ends up as one of his advisors, to reach out and take hold of the one thing that's being withheld
Mm-hmm.
by the Valar, kind of the godly creatures of this world,
Yeah.
which is being able to set foot on the coasts of Valinor.
It's beyond that too. It's also immortality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the representation
Yes,
of it.
yes,
And
yes,
so
yes.
I guess the fruit of the tree is like the representation of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right. I see what you're
Whereas
saying.
stepping onto the shores of Valinor would be like achieving immortality, I guess.
Yeah, being among divinity.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah. Yes.
And so that's part of like why I want to see such large scale to come,
Uh-huh.
because I think, doesn't it mention that the sails of the Numenorian ships like blackened the sky as they were sailing west because of the expansiveness of
Yeah. Yeah, that
thousands of
there were so many of
ships.
them. I think there were even references to like how loud they were, just like their shouts and jeers. That it was deafening.
Yeah.
There were so many of them. Yeah, there's like writing on the wall, because I think in that last episode, Pharazôn was the one who was there to enact the grieving of the death of the king, which I don't remember. Was it Palantir?
Yeah.
Tar Palantir?
Mm-hmm.
That he dies while Miriel is away, and he is the one who kind of gets to proceed over that, and he decides we are going to create a funerary, not a pyre, but like a, I don't know, what would you call it? Like a grand tomb, maybe?
Oh, okay.
Is that in the last episode? I feel like
It is. I just didn't remember what he had declared.
And that to me feels like such an admission of we are going to hold on to our past and not let ourselves die. Like your physical body may be dead, but we are not going to forget your name. Like we will not let you die. And it's this obsession with sticking to the world, even though, their mortality is a gift.
Right. Like leaving yourself behind in legacy, even if it's really of no value.
Right. It's all ostentation for Pharazôn, where I didn't get the impression from Tar Palantir. I don't know. We didn't really get to see enough of him. He seemed kind of like out of it, but yeah, I didn't get the impression that that's what he would have wanted.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a prediction that I have for maybe a focus of the next season is the response to, the queen coming back blinded. Many of the Numenorians who went with Miriel to Middle-earth, they're coming back, and we're like, we got our asses whooped. There's this crazy Mount Doom now, and Sauron does exist. And so I think that, her blindness will be seen as a weakness, and Pharazôn will take like a more active role in bringing the eminence of Numenor to Middle-earth.
Yeah, I think honestly at this point, I have more questions than predictions. Like, I'm not very good at piecing together how you would solve the setups that they've created to this point. But like for me, my mind just starts racing when I think about Mordor and Sauron now in Mordor, and thinking about currently they've set up this waning of the elves. But eventually, if they're sticking to like the canon Second Age, then there's going to be a war of the elves and Sauron.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, is Mithril going to be the thing that lets them kind of revitalize themselves and build up their power to a point where they can actually challenge the power of Mordor? So that's one question for me. I mean, obviously we've seen alluded to so far as the so far is the drowning of Numenor,
Mm-hmm.
the giant wave that'll come through and suck the whole island down into
I
the abyss.
imagine it less of a wave, like a big tsunami, and more of like the whole island just like bye-bye. Like it just sinks.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a wave from every direction as it just kind of like shloop.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see too, how they do that. But I don't know. I feel like that's kind of going to be something to end the entire series.
You don't think that they would end it at the last alliance?
I don't know.
Exasperation.
I don't know.
They would have to.
I mean, I okay. The part of me that hopes that it would end with the last alliance obviously wants to see all of the stuff that happens throughout the entire second age.
Yeah.
The part of me that doesn't want to see it end with the last alliance is the same part as you, which is disappointed with the pacing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like it'll have to move so fast if it's going to go through Numenor coming to colonize Middle Earth and then going back and then sailing for Valinor and then being destroyed and then Elendil and Isildur and whoever else escaping to Middle Earth and establishing the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor.
You're so right.
And then the Witch King coming to power and, I don't know, taking over Angmar and then starting to attack Arnor. And
don't forget the sacking of Eregion.
yeah, all of it. There's more, I don't know. There's certainly more major
the Witch
events
King.
than there are a number of seasons planned.
The Witch King is one of the wraiths, like one of the fallen kings, right?
Yeah,
There's so much that has to happen
I know.
because those rings haven't even been created yet.
Yes, that was the other thing that I was curious to talk about. Because I heard someone else say, well, it could be that the rings had already been created in Eregion before they started working on Celebrimbor's the Ring of Power.
I have a prediction about that.
Okay.
My prediction is that after making these 3 rings, they will establish their sort of like bastions, where there's going to be, Gil-galad is given one of the rings for Lindon. Celebrimbor will have one of the rings for Eregion, and then Galadriel will have one of the rings for Lorien. She's going to go through the mines of Moria to get to the other side. So we're going to see some stuff with her and Durin. Because she's going to establish like that Sylvan sort of kingdom on the other side of the Misty Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I think that on his own, Celebrimbor has already been corrupted enough by Sauron to think that he can create more rings of power on his own to help in the fight against Sauron. But that was kind of Sauron's whole idea of like, I want you to create a whole bunch of other rings, and then I'm going to bring all my forces, and I'm going to destroy your city, and I'm going to take all of those rings.
I could see that working if his taking of the rings happened before they were given out to the men and the dwarves. But not if that happened after. Like if Celebrimbor created them and then gave them out to the men and the dwarves, and then they were captured by Sauron. The reason that wouldn't make sense to me is because the differentiation between the elven rings of power, the rings of power for the elves, and the ones that they created and distributed to others is that Sauron directly assisted with and touched the rings that were given to the men and the dwarves, but he never touched the rings that were made for the elves. And so that was why they weren't immediately corrupted when he put on his own ring of power, because they could sense it and take them off. Whereas all of the other ones, they had so much more corrupting power immediately in them because Sauron had helped make them and touched them.
Yeah, they have a huge hurdle to get over, which is that whole thing.
Yeah.
Because the way that they have done it right now feels anachronistic. It feels out of order. It feels rushed. And
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to get from the point that they're at now to having these rings corrupt all of the 7 dwarf kings and the 9.
Yeah. Because like you were saying, some of the what do they call it? The Nazgul
Mm-hmm.
were human, like Numenorian kings and sorcerers.
Mm-hmm.
And so how long is Numenor going to exist to... I mean, I guess when Sauron comes and spreads his influence there, that's kind of the opportunity to distribute rings and corrupt powerful people. But I kind of got the idea that it might have been multiple generations.
I also got that impression. But they're doing things much speedier in this show. It's like really hasty every single step. So I feel like it might be at a breakneck pace.
No need to be hasty, young hobbit.
Where are
Hasty.
the Ents? Are the Ents in the appendices? Are the Ent wives in the appendices?
So. I think so.
Um,
Well, I imagine we're getting towards the end of our listeners' attention spans. Although, who knows? We've probably broken through that barrier at like 5 minutes.
if you don't know what you're getting into,
You're not listening now anyway.
It's so true. There is a steep barrier to entry, and that is we're getting deep into the lore. I do have one other prediction.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. And that is related to the stranger, or the traveler now.
I love this one.
So one of the things we noticed in the show is that these 3 witches referred to the Istari's kind of like revelation of his powers, his good powers. He says, "I am good." And then, magic comes out of him. That they refer to him as not Sauron, but the other. And so one of my sort of ideas about that, which, has not been confirmed, but my sort of thoughts about it is like, okay, I think that they are going to take all of the Istari, these members of this order of wizards, and they are going to condense it into one character. That is the Istar.
Yeah.
That opposes, so like fallen angel, and then this other angel that got like tossed out of Valinor, like a comet, just like shoom, and then an old man lands, in Middle Earth, near the Harfoots. Yes.
And they do already refer to him in that singular form, the Istar.
Yes. Which is
the wise man, the wizard.
Interesting. That's a very different take.
Yeah.
Because I think there's perhaps a preoccupation on the different like members of that order, that you learn about each one of them and like who they are, what they represent. And I feel like it doesn't not work with just kind of condensing it into one character. It just makes it feel really different to me.
Yeah. And to be honest, this is probably going to be a hot take, but if they do go that route, I'm actually really going to enjoy it, because to me that's so different that I'm not hung up on like what's the overlap, what's the same, what's the different. I'm just kind of like going with this new series, new world, new lore that's being created, rather than more directly comparing it to the stuff that I do know.
Yes, and I feel like it does still observe the same spirit of what Tolkien was trying to share.
Right.
Like, okay, Melkor corrupted many Maiar, one of those being Sauron. And then in response to this kind of like unleashed terrible Maya that's kind of like in Middle-earth, kind of still doing Melkor's will after Melkor has been cast into the beyond, they gather their forces and send one of their own into Middle-earth to, prepare the peoples of Middle-earth to, act as, a barrier against Sauron. And so I feel like it works. one of the things where I feel like there is kind of a condensing of those characters, like it's not just simply Gandalf, is that he's going to Rhûn, which was what the Blue Wizards did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess the alternative option would be if they just condensed the Blue Wizards into one person.
True. Yeah.
So if the Eastar was like made to represent both the Blue Wizards going out east as kind of because didn't they arrive before the rest of them anyway?
There's two different tellings of the Blue Wizards. Yeah. Where in the Third Age, when the Blue Wizards come, they are like, they have different names than when, I think in the appendices.
Oh.
When it talks about like, oh, they were friends, and one of them was like, I'll go, but I can't go without my buddy. And I think Palando was one of their names. Alatar and Palando.
Oh, good memory.
Thank you. And so there's kind of like some conflictingness. In the Third Age, when they show up, kind of with all of the other Istari, like Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, they just kind of head out east to gather the Easterlings to prepare them to fight Sauron, but they lose their way. That's the most that is said. I think in the other telling, when they show up during the Second Age, they also do traveling to the east and to the south. But there's kind of like a weird, like they create maybe even cults of magic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Eventually he's going to need to get back. Like he's going to the east with Nori,
right.
the Harfoot. I feel like she's the first not Harfoot. Like her deciding not to travel with her pack anymore is making the decision that she's not a Harfoot anymore.
On the way to being a hobbit?
Right. That sort of like her progeny is all of the hobbits.
Yeah.
Which is dope. I love that.
What's her last name?
Proudfoot. I think that's her friend, actually.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember, but I love that character. He will eventually need to get from the east and south, wherever he goes, back to get the Elven Ring of Power, of fire. Eventually.
Yeah. If all of the wizards are him.
Yeah.
But not if he's only the Blue Wizards.
Right.
Yeah, like if Gandalf were to come later.
Oh, interesting. I don't think so.
We'll find out.
We will find out.
We should make some bets. In the next episode, we're going to make predictions about future seasons.
Yeah.
We're going to place bets on them.
I love this.
And then after the series is over,
then we will disperse
we'll pay the costs.
Bets. Well, any closing thoughts or impressions or things that you want to leave our dear listeners with?
Just that I hope you're all as impatient as I am to see the next season.
Yes.
I'm ready for it.
Oh, me too. I love all of the actors. I feel like the actors are so committed to their roles. And if anything, like that alone will, carry me like with loving this product still. Like I feel like we shared a lot of things that we didn't love so much. But that's kind of just because we care so much. Like our love for this is so great. Because the stories are so meaningful. And I'm excited to continue to watch this product.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time on
the Lords of the Ring-Shaped Foods. Bye now.
Amen.